What's your name?
Bilal Baloch.
And why are we here?
To have a chat.
Okay. What do you think this chat's going to be about?
Some good stuff, some heavy stuff, some fun stuff.
Okay. Awesome. What is it that you do, Bilal?
I'm a venture capital investor at Shorooq, which is a UAE-based VC firm.
Our success is often a result of pivotal moments in our lives. They shape who we are. They shape our outlook on life, how we show up as leaders in what we do. Tell us about 3 pivotal moments or people in your life that shaped who you are today. One from childhood, one from teenage years, and one from your career.
I think the childhood answer is pretty obvious one that I think a lot of people would say, which is my father. I think picking a parent is probably quite common. Those early years are so important for the kinds of examples your parents set for you, the kind of modeling they do for you. And for me, I think if I had to pick one word to describe my father, it would be optimist. Right? He was an eternal optimist. Whether times were great, times were not so great, whether it was professional, personal, that optimism really showed in his interactions with people, his interactions with family. He was a traditional businessman, so interactions with customers. And so seeing that optimism day in, day out, and sort of impenetrable optimism, I think that left a real mark on me. Not because I'm like him, gregarious in the way that he was or what have you, but in a way that still till this day, and I hope for many more years to come, you lead with a view that things can be solved.
Take us to a moment where your father bestowed upon you some kind of words of wisdom, maybe in a moment where both of you were sitting together, or I don't know, maybe it was a quarrel and you heard something, I don't know, but like a moment like that, and really just take us there with you.
My father was in some respects very conceptual, right? And what I mean by that is his advice or his wisdom didn't necessarily come from a particular story or a particular experience he'd had. He did that, but it also came from, sort of words of wisdoms or nuggets that he had boiled down from his own life experiences. And so it was more about repetition than any sort of singular moment.
Nice. And
I think from a very young age, these sort of concepts have peppered my life. Do everything in moderation, right? There's no instruction that comes with that. But if you repeat that enough at a sort of values level to especially young people, it begins to stick.
So optimism, repetition, and stick to your values.
I think so. I think there's oftentimes we forget that there are such steep generational gaps, especially in my case when you have parents who'd left their home and moved to the UK.
Yeah. Totally
different culture, totally different institutions. How do you parlay that into lessons for your children if you haven't experienced them yourself? Right? So for me, my kids will be going to a school or be in an environment that is perhaps closely matched to what I experienced. But for me and my parents, the gap was pretty steep. Yet you still have to bridge that gap as a parent. And so I think for my father to use sort of, time-tested concepts and time-tested lessons around how you behave with people, should you read a newspaper, and make that a regular part of your life in order to understand the world. How do you respect your elders and why should you do that? These kinds of things, I think, sort of values and habit-driven lessons, I think.
These are very strong family values, by the way.
Very strong family values and also very universal, right? So I think they travel well, they're time-tested.
What about your teenage years? What was a pivotal moment that shaped who you are today?
Look, I think for teenagers, especially for young men, it comes down to either a coach or a teacher, right? And I was very fortunate that I had one fantastic teacher who was my history teacher, Mr. Clark. And he wasn't just like this with me, he was like this with all the students in the class, which is he had a firm, unshakable belief that you can get the best out of them.
Wow.
Right? So not too dissimilar to, a top football coach or a professional coach or a mentor, right? Their job is to find the skill and the talent inside you and help tease it out. And I think that's what a teacher does too. So the inspiration of the content is important, right? I love history. I think he seeded my love of history. But the way in which he seeded my love of history wasn't just related to the content. It was to bring to life that content for how I needed it to be presented, right? And that was different for each student.
Do you know, like for me, as I'm listening to Bilal, a lot of dots are connecting. So many dots are connecting, but I can't just reveal them just yet. I was like, that makes sense now why Bilal is like this. What about career? What's a pivotal moment or a person that affected who you are today?
For my career, and I write this in the acknowledgements of my book, was my supervisor at grad school, who then became my boss and then became a very dear friend of mine, which is Vali Nasser. And Vali is an academic and also was an advisor in the US government on US foreign policy, is a public intellectual, a writer, sort of a Renaissance man in many respects. And I think it was the first time I saw someone who had a name not too dissimilar to mine, who looked like me, who was also the child of immigrants to the US, rising up, being ambitious and being so successful. And I think that kind of representation matters. And now we talk about this a lot, right? Representation in terms of, actors of Middle Eastern or Indian origin on TV, on shows, winning Emmy Awards, winning Oscars, etc. Now it's a lot more common than it was when I was growing up. And so I think inadvertently, I was very much drawn towards him, and getting the opportunity to study under him and then work with him and then learn about how he navigated his own challenges, I think was huge for me.
What was your first meeting with him like?
My first meeting with him was in grad school, in his first lesson as part of his course on Islam and politics. Now, for me, I'm a product of being a first generation British Pakistani, grew up in the post 9/11 environment. Issues and questions around Islam and politics and West and East and clash of civilizations, these questions and challenges have been hotly debated right throughout my life. And so to have an opportunity to learn from someone in a graduate school setting where they're articulating very cleanly the relationship between these issues blew me away. I'd never heard someone really disaggregate and conceptualize these concepts before and do so in a way that speaks to a very broad audience. And so for me, that was very important to learn. And thankfully, I had an opportunity to learn that with Vali, which is how do you articulate pretty complicated stuff to a variety of audiences?
See, that's the academic in you. I feel like there's a big part of academia that drives who you are today. And as you're talking, I'm taking this in, and there's something about you, your presence, that's very much like you evoke curiosity. Like I'm listening to you and I could get curious, like, oh, wow. Yeah, what is it about Islam that we don't know yet, for example? Or something about this. Has anybody given you feedback about this before? This impact that you have on people?
Look, I think, thank you, first of all, not in a direct way, but I think having been an academic, if I look back at my career, I've been very fortunate, Khalid, incredibly fortunate that I've always landed in leadership positions. Part of that is a push factor from me. I enjoy it. I love the responsibility. I thrive in it, I think. Part of it is the pull factor. I think it's very difficult to be sort of 6'6" and walk around and and not be seen as, okay, maybe you can lead this. But look, part of it is also spending many years working very hard to develop expertise. And ultimately that comes down to communication. If I was to sum up the three different parts of my life that you just asked about, my father, my high school teacher, my mentor in grad school and Life Valley, I would say the red thread among all of them, what drew me to them and what I took from them, was different forms of communication and different forms of communicating to different audiences.
What distinguishes their form of communication from others you've met in your life?
Look, with your parents, you don't choose, right? So I wasn't drawn towards my father because he was different to anyone else. He was my father. That's the hand that was dealt to me. But now when I think back and, reflect on what made him different, I think he, for a man who was sort of, born in the baby boomer generation, and who didn't have, fancy degrees and fancy professional corporate jobs. I think what made him quite unique was his social observations and his curiosity and willingness to learn allowed him to adapt to different milieu and people. And that's something that from the outset, I think I've imbibed, as have my siblings and I think a lot of people that came in contact with him.
I have kind of like an intuition about you, that you may be very much like a chameleon, depending on the environment you're in.
Look, I don't know about chameleon. That could be a pejorative. But I think adaptability, sure.
Yeah.
But part of that is also age-related, right? I'm talking to you here, I'm reflecting. But if I think about who I am today, that space of, having to change in different environments has narrowed, right? Naturally, you become more comfortable in your skin the older you get. Your social circles narrow in terms of, old friends that you're comfortable with and around.
I'm sorry, Bilal, how old are you?
39.
You're talking about as if like you're like in your 50s or something.
I feel like it.
How come?
Well, look, I think I've squeezed a lot into the last 15, 20 years. I've been on a chase to achieve and win. And while that ambition has not left me, there is a point at which I think, my own life's experience tells me that this often happens to a lot of men. But there's a point at which I think you begin to go more in sort of cruise control. And you know when to speed up and you know when to slow down. I think that's wisdom, right? Wisdom is knowing when to speed up and knowing when to slow down.
When did you make that switch in gears?
Yeah, it's tough to point to a specific moment. Certainly, I think it's happened over the last 5 years. You have experiences professionally, you have experiences personally, you observe more of the world. Certain cycles happen, whether they're political or social or economic, and you start to see patterns repeating themselves. So you can anticipate and react better. Whereas when those things happen to you in the first instance, it's a shock.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It jolts your system. So I think part of it is the natural course of life.
Bilal, I'm wondering, what makes you compelling?
What makes me compelling?
Yeah.
Look, I'm going to fudge your question a little bit because I don't think there's any one person who is less or more compelling than the other. What I would like people to find compelling about me, if it was up to me, is I think I have a pretty fresh openness and background to learn and understand from people and different cultures and different backgrounds. Let me put it this way. If someone was to say to me, I don't think you're open to new ideas, or I don't think you're open to understanding this very unique and different way of looking at things, that would upset me.
Oof.
Yeah. So I don't have to agree with you, but I certainly don't want to be seen as someone who can't see where you're coming from or see how your ideas evolved and developed. So that's something, I think that's something that I pride myself on, and I would like to be seen as someone who has a very fresh, unique, and uncommon fabric that allows them to sort of really focus on where are your ideas coming from? Where's your background coming from? What can I do to understand it?
Well, what's the reality like right now? Because you say this is what you'd like people to say.
I think a lot of people would say that. It might get mixed in with, communication, as I mentioned earlier. I'm sure many would say that that's something that they find, what did you say, compelling?
Yeah.
I'd say those would be the two. But the one that I think is the openness to understand, reflect, and really try hard to understand where is your perspective coming from and where are your ideas coming from.
So, check this out. If you were to walk into a room without saying a word, and people would react to your presence non-verbally, how would they react?
It's a tough one.
Hey, you wanted tough questions. I brought in the tough questions.
How would they react non-verbally?
Yeah.
Look, I think if I walked into a room, no one spoke, I think people would come up to me and want to shake hands or want to talk.
Right.
I know then that goes into the verbal realm, but up until that point, the non-verbal steps would be towards me. I think that's a natural consequence of, like I said, being 6'6". Sometimes I dress very quirkily, and I like to think that I hold pretty positive energy and I lead with positive energy. It's the same thing that would attract me to someone. If someone walked into a room, if they came in with positivity,
right,
was striking and came in with on their front foot, it's the same thing that would draw me towards them.
When you walked in through the door today, my experience was the teacher has arrived. Something like that, like a mentor is like, oh. Like for me, throughout my career, maybe up until recently, it's shifted a little bit. But whenever I walk into a room and I'm about to give a talk or run a meeting or facilitate something, I see people do this non-verbally, and I start to pay attention to that. I was like, ooh, that's very interesting. And then when I leave, if it's a talk, I see people just do this. Like there's a moment of reflection, like something thought-provoking happened. Hence my question to you. Does that resonate?
Yeah, a little bit. Honestly, I haven't focused enough on the sighing or the non-verbal aspect.
That's my impact.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what your impact is, other than I want to get up and shake hands.
Yeah, I think. Look, for me, I think if I can't communicate and be verbal, my ability to engage in a room diminishes significantly. Right. I think there are people that sort of just with a sigh or the way where they look and how they stand can draw attention and communicate. For me, that is so de-emphasized. Naturally, we're physical beings, and people are looking at me, and I'm looking at them, etc. So I'm sure it's happening. But for me, unless I can communicate verbally, I feel as though I can't contribute to that room.
I'm just wondering, what does that look like in conflict?
The communication piece?
Yeah. Like, how do you show up differently in times of conflict? How does that communication level change?
Yeah. Look, I think it becomes even more important, right? One of the things that I think is perhaps most important in conflict, especially today, in a world where we're hyper aware and conscientious about differences between people. I think one thing that becomes very important to me in conflict, which I may not do in a non-conflict environment, is be a lot more aware of what I need to say to you as someone who might be aggrieved or someone who might be not very happy with a particular situation, is that I need to be able to hear you and see you and understand what you're saying, right? Even if I disagree with you. I think over the years, I've learned to both communicate my position, which might be in conflict to yours, while also leading with hearing what you have to say. And I think oftentimes in conflict, that's the challenge, is we can get so wrapped up in our own position that we fail to listen to the other side because we think listening to the other side means endorsement of that position.
But Bilal, that's like the ideal situation when it comes to conflict.
Yeah.
You know, like we have to listen, blah, blah, blah. We have to realize who are the contributors to the conflict. In reality, a lot of the times, especially in the field that you're in, that's not the case.
It's not the case in terms of outcome, right?
Say more.
Also, just because I'm able to listen to you doesn't mean that what you want is what you're going to get, right? I'm in a field where sometimes it can be game theoretic, right? That your loss is my gain.
True.
Right? And vice versa. Right? So that's the place where in my field, conflict can get, is unavoidable. Right? Because we're in a deal-making world. But that doesn't mean that the process of that deal-making should be unreasonable or uncivil or lead to a breakage in the relationship. So long as we come in understanding the rules of the game. To be quite frank, let me flip it on its head. If I'm dealing with a founder or I'm dealing with an investor or a partner, and that level of respect and civility is not there, it tells me a lot more about our relationship. And that is a point at which conflict resolution can become hard, right? So there's two aspects to it. Conflict resolution is tough because you have different outcomes of interest. That much is par for the course.
Okay.
But conflict resolution, if you can't be civil and you can't be respectful to the other person's position, and you can't even understand it, that's what leads to breakdown.
So would you consider yourself, like the way you bring your poise, as a form of mediating things like these? Like, would you put yourself in a position of a mediator than actually somebody who's confronting?
So look, if it depends on who the other side is. If it's an entity that I have a relationship with, that's let's say inside the tent, one of our founders, an investor, a partner, a colleague, then absolutely you lead with mediation, right? Because there's a relationship that goes beyond just this one thing that we are debating and arguing over. But if we are adversarial parties, then I don't need to enter into it from leading with mediation being an outcome. I'm leading with being civil, being respectful, but ultimately I need to take what I need to take from this.
If I was to go around the office and ask people about feedback on your approach, what would they say?
Well, look, I don't think I've had much conflict with my colleagues, so perhaps they won't have much experience of it. But I think they would say Bilal is generally agreeable and leads with a reasoned position where he wants to get to a place where we can both move forward together.
Would the term dark horse apply to you?
Dark horse? No, I don't think so. I think everyone sees me coming.
Really? And how do you do that?
Look, I think it goes back to the theme of this discussion. I will not shy away from presenting my position.
What part of Bilal do people not see coming?
Look, I think when anyone works with me, the one thing that they will see is what I just described. I try to lead with reason. I try to get into positions with my colleagues or my partners or my founders or investors where we can move forward together.
Right.
Right. They are inside the tent. It's one team, one dream. Right. But I think for outsiders who, from the outside in, who may not see me on a day-to-day basis, I think the one thing that they may not see coming is, I think there's two answers to this. There's a positive one, and then there's one that probably really takes them by surprise. Look, I think the positive one is, it's not lost on me that I can come across as quite intimidating in a social setting, right? My background, academically, professionally, I'm 6'6". I have a deep voice. I spend most of my time listening when I meet someone rather than talking, right? These are all ingredients that create a sort of asymmetry of what's this guy all about, right?
100%.
But once I get to know someone, I lead with empathy. And I think that that can sometimes catch people off guard of, okay, well, here's someone who's actually quite empathetic and quite normal and casual, right? So that formality goes. The speed at which the formality goes, I think, catches people off guard.
Right.
I think with people who do business with me, I think they get surprised by how singularly focused I am on winning. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't win together. But for me and the company that I represent and the ideals we represent, the values we represent, the deals we want to get into,
right,
the world we envision, my job is to make that happen. And my job is to win at doing that.
What decisions do you delay when it comes to winning?
Look, I think sometimes the challenge can be taking your time to think through the long-term repercussions, right? So if one thing that I try my best, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But one of the things I try very hard to do is, if the stakes are very high and it could have major repercussions for me and my team and my firm, it's very important to me to take a pause and be able to sit down and map it out, right? So some situations call for fast negotiation and thinking fast. That's okay. But that should never be the enemy of taking time to slow down your thinking to ensure that you are doing the best thing for your team and for your firm.
Like I'm picking up like somebody, you're good with chess. You count your moves, you know what you're getting yourself into and how to get out if you need to get out. I'd like to switch the conversation a little bit into the heart of Bilal. Which direction would you like? Direction A or B? And I'll reveal the one to choose.
Without knowing what's behind the door.
Yeah.
Let's go with B.
Oh, Bilal. Fine. What keeps you up at night?
Look, I'll start at a very abstract level and then I'll come down.
Please do.
I think implicitly or explicitly, most people, and I'm no different, they want to go to sleep at night and be comfortable with the fact that the way they spent their day, or even the way they're spending their life, is adding value.
Right.
Right? I'm adding value to my friends, my family, my colleagues, my sports team, whatever it is. It can be all of them, it can be one of them. So I think at a very abstract level, what would keep me up at night, and I want to caveat this with the fact that I sleep very well, but if I were to be kept up at night,
very interesting,
or what goes through my head, it would be at an implicit level, it would be this. Now, that's too abstract, so let's get concrete. Look, I'm a partner at one of the most active and best performing funds in the entire region. This is a region that's going through major growth, major change, and we are right at the forefront of it. That is a major responsibility. I thrive in the responsibility to contribute towards that vision and goal on a daily basis. But you also have to be humble enough to know where am I missing something? Where do I need to challenge myself? Where do I need to challenge my partners? Where might we drop the ball? And that kind of, I think one could call it fear of failure, would be a concrete example of what would keep me up at night. Another would be the future, right? This is going to sound like a cliche, but you really don't start thinking about the future of the world, the future of people, the future of society until you have kids. Now, that's not to say you only need to have kids in order to be thinking about that. Maybe prior to kids, I was a very selfish human being and I didn't think about this, but certainly post kids, that emotion, that concern goes into overdrive, right?
What might you still be selfish about that you shouldn't be selfish about?
That's a good question. Look, I think we all have to be selfish to some extent, right? Sometimes I feel as though I'm perhaps too selfish with my time, right? Selfish in the sense that I try to control it as much as I can because I have a lot of different aspects to my life that require a lot of my attention. And I'm in a world and I'm in a job where engagement with people is critical. I can't live my life or do my job or engage with my family from behind a computer, right? It requires me time. There's only so many hours in the day, right? So invariably that means some things perhaps lose out. So sometimes I think one can be selfish with that.
What's the risk of not spending that much time at work?
What is the risk of not spending
that much time at work and in return spending more time with the family, for example?
Look, I think that wholly depends on how you work, right? If I theoretically worked in a job that office hours were 9 to 3, go home after 3 p.m., spend time with your family. While the first couple of hours of that would be great, I'm a productive human being and I'm also allied to production and I'm also enthusiastic about being productive.
Right.
So at some point I would be doing work, right? I would find other things to do. I would find another way to make myself productive. Now, I just so happen to love what I do, right? Now, I've been in jobs where that hasn't been the case, or I haven't felt that. So work as delineated by hours would not impact how much effort I put into my work, to my job.
Do you know, that brings me to a certain question. You know, I've been toying with this question in my mind as I'm listening to you. Like, what's something you're longing for that would elevate your love for what you do, but hasn't happened yet? Not even longing, I would even dare to say the word yearning.
Look, the most concrete example I can give you is I am very committed and very bullish on entrepreneurs and what they're building in this region. And while I've been able to taste the victory of fundraising alongside them, or product launches alongside them, or customer acquisition alongside them, what I haven't yet experienced as much as I want to is them being able to exit their business on an exchange or exit their business through an acquisition. That kind of endpoint is something that I really crave. And for them to then go and build other businesses, right? I think in sort of capitalistic societies and setups, we have this tendency to think about business as just transactions and the exchange of money and economic value. But startups and entrepreneurs here can solve for social challenges and social problems in ways that are probably have the ability to jumpstart and kick forward entire countries, right? I was trained as a political scientist. First part of my career was spent in foreign policy, in the world of public policy in Washington, engaging with leaders and analysts and thinkers from around the world. And what entrepreneurs and businesses, local businesses from the ground up, well supported, well executed, with visionary leaders, what they are able to achieve far exceeds what, in my opinion, I experienced and have seen in the foreign policy world. That's not to say one is more important than the other, but in terms of where I think you can make the biggest impact, especially in growth markets, emerging markets, is what I'm doing today. And so in many respects, I see the role of an investor here and the role of a fund manager here as also the role of a development economist, the role of a minister, the role of a social leader, right? Because that's what we're here to do through these businesses.
How do you think this answer is impacting me right now?
Well, looking at your face, I think there's ideas churning around on where you may have seen this in your own life.
Quite frankly, this is the first glimpse of your heart that I am picking up from our interview. Like, I can finally see your heart here. Do you feel the same?
Yeah.
Like, it's just your demeanor changed, the way you're sitting changed, the way you tone. And I'm wondering, what is it about these real world problems and entrepreneurship that speaks to this over there?
Look, it's what I spend my day doing, right? I see it up front. I'm very privileged to be able to see this up front and close about the magnitude of problems and challenges that can be solved through technology, through the guile of entrepreneurs, and through pointing that energy in the right direction.
In that case, Bilal, what one real world problem, if an entrepreneur tackles today, and you're part of that somehow, it would really bring a tear down from your eyes. Like, that's like, oh, thank God. Like this, the world can be a better place now.
Access to food.
Oof.
I think access to food, access to good, clean, healthy food in a sustainable way, and that entire supply chain from growing it, farming it, access to markets, and being able to complete that virtuous cycle. I think that is the bedrock of any society. Of course, education is important. Shelter is important. All of these factors So I would give you a whole host. But if I had to give a silver bullet, when I think about the entire region that we look at, sort of from Morocco to Bangladesh, and both the urban environments and the periphery of these places, I would say access to food.
Is this why you pursued cooking?
Yeah, I love cooking. In fact, me and all my siblings, we love cooking.
Wow.
I think it's also how we show love, I think. And cooking different kinds of cuisines and really venturing out of our comfort zone.
Walk us through maybe a moment when you and your siblings and your mom were in the same kitchen. What was that like?
I think we haven't all been in the kitchen at the same time. But what would happen is definitely around sort of most Eids, we would probably end up in the same kitchen. Now, me and my siblings have done around, making Thanksgiving dinner or, Eid dinner or Christmas dinner, any kind of occasion, where we can get a chance on this time off and days off and you can do it. But we're also very competitive. So usually, it's one of us is taking the lead.
That would be you.
Oh no, it depends on, where we are and what time it is. Yeah.
Do you know, Bilal, one of the metaphors I feel is talks about who you are. You feel to me like a banyan tree.
Okay.
Like
in size.
Not just in size, but in you cast a shadow in a beautiful way. Even when you're talking about cooking, it's almost like there's an includer in you. And I feel like that's a part, I'm wondering if it really shows up in what you do. I get the sense that when at work, you bring that royal, regal poise to you. You speak and you articulate very well. But then there's this green, nurturing, let's come together piece. I don't know how much that shows up in your work at the get-go.
Look, it has to, right? I oversee 80 portfolio companies. These are some of the leading companies in the region, some of the best founders in the region. Founders are not shrinking violets, they will come after you and come at you if they're not happy or if they need something or if they disagree with you. Some level of nurturing probably does need to take place. I wonder actually, just given that you asked that, whether I would be as good at my job had I not also been a parent.
Ooh.
Right? Now, some of these attributes have been cultivated in a professional setting and have always been there. But some level of nurturing, as you mature, as you get older, as you become a parent, as you sort of experience different aspects and facets of life, I think that's important. Because your founders are pushing a boulder up the hill.
True.
The odds are against you. You're typically trying to do something that no one else has done.
100%.
You're trying to do it in an environment where you then need people to believe in you so that you can raise money for it.
Right.
So you're functioning to raise risk capital. You're functioning to sell people on oftentimes an idea that hasn't been done yet. And all the while you're doing it with less compensation than perhaps your market rate would be, right? And dealing with those types of people who are going through that, and I've been there myself, I've been a founder myself, you have to approach them in a way that leads with understanding, leads with nurturing. But like with any good nurturing, you also need to shut things down sometimes. And you need to put a mirror up. And you can't be agreeable. So like I said earlier, I think one of the things that comes with age is an experience, professional, personal, is knowing when to speed up and knowing when to slow down.
So far in our conversation, Bilal, what's clear to you about your impact that wasn't clear before?
Look, I don't live my life on a daily basis walking around and thinking about the things that you're bringing up for me, right? So there's a lot to actually chew on here.
I'm glad.
I'm chewing on in real time, and I'll chew on afterwards as well. I'm one at the same time, I think, healthily cognizant of the impact that I can have on people. But I'm at the same time, I don't wear that on my sleeve on a daily basis. So things you're asking me about, the reactions people have to me, or the non-verbal and verbal ways in which I interact with people and they with me, these are not things that I wear on my sleeve, that I think about. But that one I will now keep an eye on, is what are the non-verbal ways in which people react. I think it's important to know.
Yeah, it speaks to your presence wherever you go. Because people unconsciously pick up on how we carry ourselves.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just what we say. If we were to move the needle somehow to something better in your impact, which of the colors that I showed you earlier would you need to bring out more?
In my impact?
Yeah, if we were to move the needle in your impact, which color would be a stretch, but would have to bring out more? It's pink, isn't it?
It's either pink or orange.
Man, I'm telling you.
It's either pink or orange.
What would it take to bring out pink or orange?
Getting feedback, being aware of it.
Yeah.
Breaking up your routine.
What's the easiest, fastest way I could break the ice with you if you were in pink or orange? Easiest, fastest way.
The easiest way for you to break the ice with me?
Yeah, if you were in pink or orange.
Make me laugh.
Make you laugh? It's a good joke. This is why you're into comedy.
Yes. If you make me laugh, and it could be, honestly, it could be a terrible dad joke. But if you make me laugh, that's it.
So just for the viewers, and as a reminder, pink is more about safety, being trusted, held, like warmth, softness, that kind of stuff, right? Fuzziness. Yeah. Orange, something exciting is happening, saying a big yes to what's coming.
Yeah.
What does it have to do with your excitement about life, saying yes to the future, yearning, longing, fulfillment, joy? What's the connection there?
Look, I believe very strongly, and this is a prophetic tradition, that, what you leave behind are good deeds, right? And where you invest in, are those things lasting?
Right.
And I think if we can solve for things like access to education, access to healthcare, access to food, as I mentioned, these are the challenges that outlast you. It's my view of myself, or my legacy, or my investment does not end at death, right? I believe that that's how I have to live my life.
What does that have to say about your purpose in life, Bilal?
That I have to do as much as I can while I'm on this earth.
About what?
About the issues that I feel strongly about, and the people that I feel closest to, and the things that I want to learn, and make sure that they are passed on.
What's in common between being a father, being a husband, being part of Shorooq, related to your purpose?
I think they're all about learning. I mean, it's very selfish for me, right? I learn a lot from my kids, but I also learn a lot by virtue of the fact that I'm a father, right? There is an evolutionary mechanism, especially for men when they become parents. The most obvious evolutionary mechanisms are around responsibility, right to care, so on and so forth. But like I mentioned, I think it also expands the aperture for how you think about society, the world, your impact, what you will leave behind. And I don't mean what you will leave behind sort of investments and monetarily. I mean, in terms of even ideas and knowledge.
Legacy.
That's also what we're doing at Shorooq, right? At Shorooq, we're not just investing in these businesses and saying, come back to us in 10 years when you have an exit, otherwise, see you later, right? The reason I was hired in at Shorooq, among other things, was to also establish and lead value creation. Value creation for an early stage investor is completely uncommon, almost unheard of, right? Value creation is done by private equity investors and other types of investors that have skin in the game that constitutes a majority or a near majority of ownership. For an early stage investor that aims to get around 10% of a company to do value creation is really quite unique. But the reason we do it is because we want to add value to these companies in a way that increases the probability of their success, even when they've gone way past us being able to invest in them.
Okay. What does that have to do with resilient founders?
How does that relate to resilient founders?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Look, I think resilience in any person, founder or otherwise, is an important quality, right? Because the one thing that's constant is that shit happens, right? So we have to be resilient. Founders face that at a totally different level, right? On a daily basis, all you're doing is dealing with confirming or disconfirming evidence. Your product works, no, it doesn't work. It works, it doesn't work. This piece of our code has gone awry, has been manipulated, is wrong. We need to rethink. The product doesn't match up to what clients want. You are constantly dealing with a barrage of critique, challenges, confirming and disconfirming evidence, sometimes both on the same day. In fact, if you don't have resilience, you're not going to last.
And I feel that to talk about something like product or something, like sometimes you see like a Series A company and they're still obsessed about product. Like, come on, guys, time for revenue. Where's the revenue? Where's the money?
Yeah.
And that brings me to another question. For you, how you lead yourself and your life, how does that affect the way you see investability?
Look, perhaps it doesn't, right? I lead my life in a very intense, hyper-organized and maximizing every drop of the day approach. That much allows me, I think, to spot what a top founder looks like and draws me to those types of people. But in other ways, in my own life, I live a very boring life as well, right? Startup founders and what startups are doing is very innovative and risky and imaginative. It's only the experience I've had as a founder that really allows me to flex in that direction.
You are gifted with something, Bilal.
Yeah.
Not only were you a founder, you were co-CEO.
Yes.
That's an incredibly unique position.
It's uncommon, yes.
Not many founders can hold that position. There's a trait in you, I feel, that holds the middle ground very well. It's almost akin to being a mediator of some sorts. Not many founders know how to do that. In my world, I feel this is part of the reason why not many are investable today. They can't maintain their composure in the face of all this adversity. But you seem to do that very well. How?
Look, I think part of it is I'm the youngest of four, right? I grew up in a household of very strong personalities, and having the fortune of being able to observe those very strong personalities and very different personalities go through the motions of life before I did.
You're right.
Even now, right? That learning doesn't stop. So I think right from the outset, I've experienced an environment where the synthesis of positions, where learning what not to do is a natural part of my sibling positionality, right?
I'm smiling because there's this thing called middle child syndrome.
Yeah.
And then like you're the youngest child syndrome. You guys have like the perspective of everything. And he was like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, but do this.
Right.
Only this.
And then look, I think we are so much a function of where we grow up and the time in which we grow up, right? I'm a first generation British Pakistani practicing Muslim, right? I grew up in the post 9/11 environment. Geopolitically, economically, politically, the Britain I grew up in, the world I grew up in, the Muslim community I grew up in, the era I grew up in, asked a very, very tough question of you, which was, are you going to be resilient and navigate this and focus on what you need to focus on in order to win? Or are you going to retrench? And I think the same choice faces founders and people in most areas of their life. Are you going to be resilient or are you going to retrench? And I saw what retrenchment looked like. People in the neighborhood, friends, what have you. But resilience is what I experienced a lot more of. I wouldn't say I'm unique in that. I think a lot of people I grew up with in my family, teachers, friends, colleagues, in that milieu, developed that resilience. And, subhanAllah, part of it is, I'm sure, God-given as well, whether you have that character trait or not.
What's fascinating to me is the context that you talked about right now. Like there are layers of cultures. Like there's the UK culture, then there's you being a Pakistani born in the UK or with Pakistani origins, right? And then there is the environment that you grew up in, all of this. How did that impact your ability to express yourself in that, ecosystem?
It throws you into the deep end of exploring ideas. You have to be open to different ideas. You have to be open to batting away ideas that come at you. You have to be able to falsify ideas. You have to be able to confirm ideas. From every which way, you're being told, this is what you and your community are about. This is how the world works. This is how, if you do A and B, it leads to C. You're in a very intense environment of being challenged on ideas.
I love how a lot of your upbringing, the cultural norms that you were exposed to, your values, your love for family, cooking, comedy, has somehow forged this character that indirectly is imparting that knowledge into the founders that you're working with today. Even your definition of a man somehow is subtly inserted into what you do. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think that's what we're all made up of, right? It's interesting. I don't see what I do. This is going to sound like a cliche. I really don't see what I do as work in the traditional sense of, the sort of production forces sense of work.
Yeah.
I don't see it as going in, clocking out. You asked me earlier about, what if your hours were less or I don't see it as work. Naturally, of course, I want to make sure I exercise. I want to make sure I get time with my family. I want to make sure I can, catch a show. I want to make sure I get to see that episode that I want to watch, or I get to see the Liverpool game on the weekend. I'm not an automaton, but my work does sort of weave into my life. Because dealing with, engaging with our companies and trying to achieve our mission at Shorooq, which is a very ambitious one, but one that we think we can achieve. It's a natural outgrowth of all the experiences I've had in my life.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. This brings us to a special segment that we call the curtain call. So the curtain call is in theater or in acting, all the actors come, right? And people applaud with like a lot of passion to the performance.
Yeah.
So I would invite you to bring out the parts of Bilal that would be evoked from the current questions. There is one caveat.
Okay.
You cannot answer from your expertise or your mind. I'm going to ask you to answer either from your instincts or your intuition.
Okay.
So, sorry, my first question to you would be, if this interview were to be watched by your grandchildren 30 years from now, what do you hope they take away from this interview? Instincts, intuition. It's the first thing that comes to mind.
There is nothing more important than being rooted in values and knowing what those values are.
Beautiful. What's the one message from your life story that the world hasn't fully heard yet?
What is the one
message from your life story that the world has not fully heard yet?
Oof. There's a lot of failures to lead to a lot of successes. The failures have to come first. The failures have to come first.
You say it with almost like an unfortunate tone.
No, I don't think it's unfortunate. I think it's hard to digest when you're a young person. And it's hard to digest if you're looking at it from the outside in and someone's CV and background and jobs looks sparkly and exciting. And I thought that when people would say that, that they were just saying it to be humble or perhaps inflating. But really, there's a whole number of rejections and failures that need to happen before your successes come. And those failures and rejections, that's what we call them. But actually, my belief is that they are sort of the beautiful guiding hand of God telling you that this is not the right direction for you.
And what do you hope, and who do you hope watches this, and what do you want them to see in themselves through you?
Look, I hope a variety of people watch this. But specifically, I think those that are in some way, shape or form interested in venture capital, technology, the venture ecosystem. And sometimes, and I think oftentimes intentionally and by design, venture capital and venture capitalists can be, they can hide behind the asymmetry. There's a shadowiness to our world. Now, what do we do? How do we do it? What do we get paid? These are the questions, right? I hope people watch this and realize that there are very real human beings, not too dissimilar to themselves, who are in this industry and who don't just see it in transactional ways and are actually in it to help impact society, our economic orders and people in very real ways.
Beautifully said. If your life had a single through line, a message that's been trying to be delivered to you, what would it be?
Resilience. You said it beautifully. I think the message to me has always been be resilient.
Bilal, if your work disappeared tomorrow, all of it, what would you want to remain in people's hearts because of you?
Say that last part again.
If your work disappeared tomorrow, what would you want to remain in people's hearts because of you?
Not that I was able to bring optimism and belief to people that I've been around. Certainly professionally, hopefully personally. That's what I'd like.
Here's a bonus one. If the world was to give you today a standing ovation that you would shy away from, but rightfully so, is just for you, what would it be about?
I'll give you a conceptual one. I think maintaining integrity and dignity in the face of real life challenges.
Can you give us one that's not conceptual?
Look, an extension of that is I have worked very hard at, and I think achieved the ability to be grounded despite being in very privileged positions that can often be inaccessible.
Yes.
And so the more inaccessible the world around me becomes to outsiders, the more I work hard at making myself accessible, time permitting, to people, places. And I think that's worth applauding.
One of the things, this is the second time I'm referencing this. So the previous guest, we talked about The Sopranos.
Yeah.
So with you, it's The Godfather.
Yeah.
Do you remember in the first film, and he tells Tom Hagen, the consigliere, you're out. You're not a wartime consigliere. I get the sense, Bilal, because of your composure, you're actually a very good wartime consigliere. Like when shit hits the fan, pick up the phone and call Bilal. Because you need somebody who's so poised and composed, who could help you get curious about things that you don't see yet, but will make the biggest difference if you listen. Does that resonate?
But the interesting thing about Tom Hagen in that movie was that by the time the second film comes around, he's exactly who's needed for wartime.
That's exactly it.
Right. So I think you have to have the ability to flex. And I absolutely would put myself first forward in a crisis, in a conflict, because I have unshakable belief that I can help solve it, or at least make a valiant attempt at it. But you also need to be able to flex in peacetime.
Beautiful. And with that, any parting words for our audience?
No, thank you so much for this really special discussion. Really, I learned a lot more about myself than I did about you, which makes me slightly uncomfortable because usually I'm the one asking questions.
Yes.
But it was a nice opportunity to be in this seat.
Yeah.
And I hope anyone listening and watching can take something away.
I'm very proud for you that you were able to take the seat in the spotlight. People like us who love to ask questions don't do that often. So thank you for your raw, candid, words. And this was fun.
Yeah, it really was. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
All right.
Dude, that was awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was so fun.